Hello and welcome to another in the Director's Cut series for the Faculty of Surgical Trainers. My name is David O'Regan and I'm currently the Director of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers, and it's been my pleasure and privilege to do this over the past 3 years. I introduced the Director's Cut to explore different elements of surgical training and practice of surgery, looking through the lens of experts out with our field. I am joined today by Niall Downey. Now, what's interesting is that Niall qualified as a doctor from Trinity College Dublin in 1993, and he embarked upon surgical training, obtaining his fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland in 1997. He worked as an SHO at Royal Victoria Hospital, then as a registrar in the cardiothoracic unit in Dublin. We are probably of the same era, because I too was a registrar in cardiothoracic surgery in 1999, and there were indeed pressures on the system with a lack of availability of consultant jobs. Niall decided to leave the profession and embark upon a career with Aer Lingus. He initially worked with A&E before transferring to full-time pilot training and qualified as a captain in 2010. He currently works as a captain with Aer Lingus on the A320 European, what's the word?
European fleet.
Yes, and also on the A321 transatlantic flights. Niall has brought his expertise as a pilot and as a doctor into a company called Framework Health that provides aviation-style safety training to healthcare organizations. And he's been recently appointed an expert advisor to advise the Northern Ireland Executive New Improvement Institute. Now, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on this webinar.
Thank you, David.
And you are obviously driven towards being a clinician and doing surgery. And why did you want to do surgery and cardiothoracic surgery in particular in those early days?
I think when I was doing my A-levels, when we're deciding on a career path, most of us want to do something that's going to be useful to people and something that's going to be interesting. So obviously medicine ticked those boxes. For surgery, again, a lot of us I think want something that's going to be sort of a bit more exciting and stimulating. And surgery again ticks those boxes. And cardiothoracic, I just thought was the ultimate in sort of something that was going to be interesting and stimulating. That most of what we do in cardiothoracic is sort of life and death stuff. So I suppose it was a bit more high octane, a bit more sort of stimulating than a lot of other sort of fields would be. So that's what attracted me into cardiothoracic surgery.
And why did you leave the profession in 1999?
Well, as you said in your introduction, total lack of job opportunities. I had applied for training posts. I was in the Belfast and then in the Dublin systems. And at that stage, it was during the specialist registrar era. I had only just come in, I think, a couple of years before that. And I think the idea was that instead of training loads and loads of registrars that didn't have consultant posts, they would just train enough to do. But unfortunately, that was only a fraction of the people needed to actually run the service. Like in Dublin, where I was, I think there was 3 training posts, but there was actually about 12 or 13 of us working as registrars. So that meant there was inevitably going to be some of us that would fall between the stools. I applied for jobs in the UK and also was shortlisted in Mass General in Boston for a residency program there. Tried various places in the States, tried Australia. And as you know, there was loads of work available, but no consultant training posts. So eventually I realized that I was running out of road and that there was no sort of consultant posts coming or training posts coming down the line inside my sort of time frame. And I was left, basically I had to make a decision. Do I hang around and hope for the best, even though all the evidence was showing it wasn't going to work, or do I jump ship and do something else? So the following Sunday, Aer Lingus happened to have an ad in the paper, so I decided to jump ship.
A very brave decision.
Yeah, it was a very scary decision. I'd spent, I was just about to turn 30 at that stage. I'd spent 12 years training in medicine at that stage. I had done my 6 years in Trinity, and I'd gone back and taught as a demonstrator for a year, and then went and did the surgical training program in Belfast and got my fellowship, and then had headed back down to Dublin to the National Cardiac Surgery Unit there. So I had invested an awful lot of time and an awful lot of sort of energy into getting as far as I got. And obviously I was very, as most of us are in cardiothoracic, it's not something you drift into. Most of us tend to be fairly sort of driven and dedicated to it. So I'd invested 12 years of my life into it at that stage, and sort of felt that I had no option but to jump ship. So it was a brave decision in that sort of like leaving was a big step, but it was made easier in the fact that I basically could see no other alternative.
Did you have family at the time?
I wasn't married at that stage. I would say I was going out with Judith, who's now my wife at that stage. So obviously with having children or having any other ties like that, it would have made the decision a lot harder. Now, I did have a mortgage at that stage, and I had sort of bills to pay and so on. And by going back into the cadet training program, I was basically going back to earning around about 50, 60 pounds a week for what lasted about 14 months. So basically I had to take out a bank loan to try and cover my mortgage payments and sort of basic bills such as that during my training. So yes, it was a big step.
It's a high cost of training. And as an aside, thinking of the no jobs available and a surplus of trainees in cardiothoracic at the time, do you think, it's maybe a loaded question, do you think the system could have improved the matching of numbers of trainees to the number of posts? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely think the system could have been structured better. Now, obviously, there was probably never going to be enough posts to cover absolutely everybody, but there needs to be some sort of training plan or training structure. Cardiothoracic is not the sort of thing people drift into. We tend to be very driven sort of people and very ambitious people, and I don't really think it's acceptable that we can get people sort of trained up as far as registrar level and then just sort of cast them aside saying, sorry, there isn't room for you. Now, apart from myself, I wasn't the only one, obviously. I've got various colleagues who were in the same position, and they end up, some of them got through, some of them didn't. Some of them ended up going into GP work that they weren't really interested in and possibly weren't really suited for. So saying there was never going to be enough jobs for everybody, but I do think the system needs to be structured better to make use of the resources that it has. I mean, we constantly hear in the media at the minute, especially during COVID, about the lack of staff available to work in healthcare. And yet the staff that are there, generally, I think get treated quite badly. So I think we need to start looking after our staff better and sort of making more of an effort to give them some sort of career path or career structure.
Indeed, and that's the subject of many a conversation and further debate. But you saw this advert in the newspaper for the airline industry. Why the airline industry? What was it about that advert that appealed to you?
Well, to be honest, it was a complete fluke. I'd been shortlisted. There was a training job in Dublin that I had applied for, and the shortlist was coming out. It was a Monday in March in 1999. And when the shortlist came out, I wasn't on the shortlist, which is very unusual for someone working in that department who, as far as I'm aware, hadn't had any sort of adverse reasons to not get selected. And I was continuing to work there. I was continuing to get 6-month contracts. So I presume if I hadn't been capable, I wouldn't be getting kept on. There was plenty of other applicants for my job. When I saw the ad in the paper, that was the following Sunday. I said the shortlist came out on the Monday. I wasn't on it. I spent the week sort of inquiring as to what was actually going on, because obviously it didn't really make sense to me. By the end of the week, I'd worked out that I wasn't getting a training job. And as I say, I had already tried many other countries elsewhere and realized by about the Friday that I had run out of road and had a very depressing weekend. And on the Sunday afternoon, I happened to open the paper and just saw the ad. I had no previous interest in aviation. I had no background in it. I had no family history in it. I'd never done any flying hours. I just saw the ad and thought, right, I spent 12 years on this career. It appears to have reached the dead end. I need a career. I'm nearly 30. I'm still young enough to change. And I saw the ad in the paper and was literally just, yeah, let's have a go. It's just a pure fluke that I happened to see the ad that day.
and obviously successful, and you've made a fantastic career in the airline industry. Tell us about your training and what did you learn in surgery that helped you with that transition and training?
Well, the training, I was very lucky. The job that I had seen advertised in the paper was the Aer Lingus Cadet Program. So that meant that we could apply, and anyone who was successful, Aer Lingus actually paid for the training, which works out around about £120,000 worth in current money. There was about 4,500 of us answered the ad, and eventually they took on about 38 of us that year. So I got in number 11 of the 38 and headed off to Oxford for 14 months to do my training. So part of the time in Oxford and a couple of months in Arizona, flying over there where the weather was better and we could get a better run at the actual flying exams initially. Surgery would have helped in that obviously it was very intense. There was ground school and there was hands-on flying. So with surgery, we're used to sort of assimilating information. We're used to studying. We're used to learning information about topics that we don't really know an awful lot about, and assimilating it fairly quickly and doing something with it. And with the actual hands-on, again, in surgery, we're used to actually using our hands and hand-eye coordination. Now, I did find that my hand-eye coordination wasn't quite as good as some of my classmates. To say by that stage, I had now turned 30. Quite a few of my classmates were about 18 or 19 and were used to playing computer games and stuff. So their hand-eye coordination was a bit sharper than mine. But again, in surgery, we're used to sort of keeping going. Once you've started a case, once you've opened the chest, there's no backing down. You have to finish the case and get the patient off the table. So once I actually started my training, I was going to be a bit slower than some of my classmates, but I was going to make it to the finish line, and I did. So I think surgery was useful in that way go in with a certain mindset, a certain determination that we're going to reach the finish line here.
Just coming back to the computer games and referring to your younger classmates, do you think being good at computer games would make you good at surgery? I can understand how it could make you better at flying a plane, because there are games where you can actually fly planes.
Yeah, well, I think it will contribute to the actual doing the surgery. Now it comes down to how do you define being good at surgery? I know some people that I work with who their hands were absolutely godlike. They were incredible. They could do things with their hands that I could only dream of doing. But I'm not sure that they were really good surgeons. They couldn't speak to patients. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't communicate with families. They couldn't work with colleagues. They were great at working by themselves and say they could do incredible things with their hands. But I think surgery is a bit broader than that, especially in cardiothoracic, where most of the stuff we do can be life and death almost every day. That requires being able to communicate with patients and with families and sort of bring them into the loop of what's going on. So yeah, the computer games are very good at hand-eye coordination, and a lot of stuff now obviously is becoming robotic surgery and stuff. So it's actually basically turning into a computer game. So it's very good at training people from the actual sort of manual dexterity point of view. But I think surgery is broader than that. And I think part of the problem in surgery is that we focus too much on the hand-eye coordination and not on the overall sort of picture of what we need.
So tell us about your training in Arizona and Oxford then. What did that training involve and how did it differ from your surgical training in general principles?
There's the academic aspect. At that stage, there was a new system coming in across Europe, a new examination system. Instead of the Civil Aviation Authority in London, the CAA, coordinating it, it had now become Europe-wide. So it was the Joint Aviation Authority, the JAA, based in Europe. And there was a new exam system coming in, which caused a lot of confusion, and there were a lot of issues with it for the first year or two until the exams actually bedded in. But the two big phases were, so the ground school exams. There was 14 ground school exams. It's still the same today. To get the professional license is the Airline Transport Pilot's License and ATPL. There's 2 blocks of 7 sets of exams, and then there's 5 separate flying exams, starting at basically PPL level, where you'll come out with a private pilot's license, and leading up then to the 5th stage is the multi-engine instrument rating, which where we fly a twin-engine plane, learn how to deal with flying it on one engine, which obviously we do in our simulators in jets all the time, and also learning to fly in sort of congested airspace. Now, in Oxford, obviously, we were quite close to London airspace. So part of our exam was that we had to be able to fly into London's, I say, Heathrow airspace, and be able to handle ourselves and basically keep out of the way of big jets, but be aware that you're flying as a professional in a professional capacity, and know like what your restrictions were, what you could do, what you couldn't do. So the training like that way, it was, again, like surgery, there was the academic side and there was the actual hands-on side. And as I say, like the academic side came fairly quickly to me, even though it was topics I'd never studied before, like meteorology and instruments and a lot of mechanical stuff. I was able to assimilate the information fairly quickly. The actual hands-on flying, as I say, took me a bit longer. I had to work a bit harder than some of the other guys. Some of the guys just got into plane and flew it like it was natural. It was like riding a bike, whereas I had to sort of work a bit harder and struggle a bit harder. But at the end of the day, I still got to the finish line, and we're now all in the same position.
So coming back to that, that's an interesting observation now. When you said you had to work harder, how were you helped with that learning? If you were not, to paraphrase your own words, you were not a natural flyer. How did the training to be a pilot help you become an obvious natural flyer?
Well, I'm still not an obvious natural flyer. Again, as I worked hard to get to the stage I'm at, and obviously skills sort of become more natural as you practice them and as you work at them. Again, during the pandemic, we've noticed a lot of surgeons, their skills have deteriorated because they haven't been operating. In aviation, we have what's called recency. Before the pandemic, we had to do 3 takeoffs and 3 landings every 45 days to make sure that we were still sort of current and capable of flying the plane. And they relaxed the rules a little bit during COVID just to try and keep pilots current. But generally, you find if you're not actually operating, your hands-on skills do deteriorate. So again, one of the things we could look at in surgery, I think that we could learn from aviation is a similar idea. I just came back from New York at the weekend. As well as recency on actually flying the plane, we've got a recency regulation for flying transatlantic routes because there's different procedures. There's different procedures for crossing the Atlantic than there are, say, flying around Europe. So like we have a recency rule that if you haven't done a transatlantic flight in 120 days, we have to do a refresher sort of training program. It's an online program that just takes about 15 or 20 minutes just to get you back up to speed with the procedures that you'll be using. And if I haven't done a transatlantic flight for 150 days, so about 5 months basically, I have to fly it with a training captain beside me, just so that one of us is fully up to speed, and then that revalidates you. Again, whereas in surgery, I know like after I left, they brought in the point system where you had to do a certain number of CPD points to keep licenses valid. But I think a lot of us know that a lot of the stuff that we were actually sort of scoring CPD points for might not actually be relevant to our actual work. Whereas I think possibly we could start looking at some sort of regular, proper revalidation system in surgery to make sure that people their actual skills are up to scratch. Another thing in aviation, if we have issues, we can put our hands up and adjust culture and acknowledge them. Again, in surgery, I don't think you guys have the luxury of that. It's still a name, blame, shame culture. So if people's skills are deteriorating, people are very slow to put their hands up and acknowledge it. And trainees are certainly not going to put their hands up and suggest it to a consultant, because as you know, consultants decide who the next registrar is going to be. So from a career prospects point of view, you're not going to speak up.
That is a very astute observation. Just explain a little bit more the recency principle. And you said 150 days without flying across the Atlantic, you have to have a captain by you. So bringing it back to the current COVID problem, many trainees have not had hands-on at all. Do you think this recency principle could be applied to surgery?
Well, I think it is being applied now. I have a few friends, obviously, who are still operating. One of my friends in Belfast, he's one of the head surgeons in the Belfast Trust, and he's very interested in the whole aviation angle and what we can contribute. So when they started back to surgery last year after the initial waves of COVID, he actually applied a similar principle that for his first few major cases back, he and one of his consultant colleagues operated together. Now they had a trainee helping as well, but rather than a consultant operating with a trainee, For the first week or two back, the two of them operated as two consultants together so they could keep an eye on each other to try and sort of apply our recency type principle. Now, again, our recency principles are, if you haven't flown at all, we have to fly, so the rules at that stage were 3 times within 45 days. If we go outside that, we have to go back into the simulator and do a quick refresher. If it's beyond another certain cutoff point, we have to do a bigger refresher training. And they say I was on the Boeing 757 fleet for a couple of years up until 2019. When I came back, I had to do a full 4-month retraining program back onto the Airbus, even though I'd already flown an A320 for about 13 years. We started work on the principle, well, you haven't flown it for a while, so we assume that you've forgotten most of what you know, and we now need to sort of relearn it all from scratch. Again, in surgery, there's no formal rules for stuff like that, but I think some surgeons are starting to sort of buy into the idea that error is going to be more common if you haven't been practicing something regularly, and they're starting to apply our principles just off their own sort of decisions rather than through any regulations.
This is very interesting as we compare and contrast training of surgeons and pilots. So if for no fault of your own, you haven't flown across the Atlantic for a while, you would be taken out of the service, still paid, but properly trained to go back in the service.
Yeah, well, even to sort of bring that back even just to the European flights, we've got 750 pilots in Aer Lingus. And during COVID, at our worst point, we've got 55 airplanes. At our worst point during COVID, we were down to 3 flights a day total over the entire 55 airplanes. We had a Dublin Heathrow, a Dublin New York, and a Dublin Chicago. And obviously, with that number of flights, there isn't enough flights to keep everybody current. So again, one of the things we use regularly in our training is simulation. Which again is something that's starting to be used a bit more in healthcare, and I think needs to be expanded and used an awful lot more. We end up with about 200 pilots who were completely off the flying register totally because their currency had expired, and we just couldn't maintain the currency. Now, initially, what we did is we put people in the simulator, and the regulations are literally 3 takeoffs and landings. So we had the simulator set up that you would walk into the simulator, there'd be an instructor in whatever the appropriate seat was. If you're a captain, you fly in the left seat, there's an instructor in the right. They closed the door of the simulator, the plane was on the runway with the engines running, and you literally did a takeoff. I got to 1,000 feet, they froze the simulator, repositioned it back to 4 miles out, coming in, wheels down, flaps out, ready to land, let you do a landing, did a touch and go, back and basically did 3 laps of that. The whole thing took about 10 minutes. So there's 3 takeoffs and 3 landings. So now you're legal again for another couple of months. And then the next guy came in. So we were literally sort of going through 5 or 6 people an hour, just revalidating currencies. But again, it was ticking boxes. It was literally 3 takeoffs and landings. It wasn't 3 flights. And it, after the first sort of lap or 2 of that, we decided, right, well, this isn't really achieving, it's achieving like the legal requirement, but it's not really achieving the safety requirement. So then we just started letting guys go out of recency. But as you say, they stayed on the books. They stayed on our basic salaries. Now, obviously, during the time of COVID in Aer Lingus, the entire pilot body was on less than half pay for 18 months. We're only starting to come out of that in the last 2 to 3 months now. So the guys, they stayed on the ground on the half pay, the same as the rest of us, but they stayed on the books because obviously Aer Lingus didn't want to lose the staff because it costs an awful lot to train us. It costs an awful lot to revalidate us. So they kept us on the books because when things do start to pick up, which they are doing now, we still need staff available. But just regards to simulation, though, I think we need to be using simulation a lot more in healthcare. You were saying about basically Microsoft's flight sim. Some of that is extremely accurate. It's not accurate enough, obviously, to qualify, but I qualified to fly an Airbus A330 across the Atlantic. And it's a $250 million worth of airplane. The first time I actually had myself in the front seat of an Airbus 330. I had 300 passengers behind me. I'd never actually set foot in the airplane before. It was learned to fly totally through the simulator. Now, our simulators are that accurate that we can, it's called zero flight time training, ZFTT. We can learn to fly the plane with passengers without ever having to set foot on one. Again, surgery, I don't think it's going to reach that stage, but there is an awful lot of simulation available in surgery, and I think we need to start making better use of it and better use of the actual training time in the simulator. I think it needs to be structured better in surgery, that say in aviation, I'm in the simulator tomorrow for my 6 monthly check. Every minute is basically accounted for. There's certain things we want to cover. There's certain boxes that we legally need to tick, and there's certain boxes that we want to tick based on what we've seen over, say, global aviation in the last year or two, things that need to be focused on. So we're very focused in our simulator training. I think healthcare still sees it more as a bit of a toy, really, and something that's a bit of fun. I think that we could be using it an awful lot more, especially, say, laparoscopic training. Like laparoscopic is basically it's like a computer game anyway. It can be set up the same way. You're using the hands-on equipment and you're looking at a screen. The patient is there as well, but I mean that seems set up almost designed for computer simulation and for simulation training. And I think that's something that we could expand an awful lot more on over the next decade or so.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm interested that your first proper flight across the Atlantic had 300 passengers in the back, but you'd gone through comprehensive simulated training. How did you feel doing the real thing? Did it feel any different? Were you nervous?
Well, you're slightly nervous, but again, it's like in surgery. You can't focus on being nervous. You need to focus on the task in hand. So once you actually get started, make the initial incision, you forget about being nervous. You've got a job to do. You've got things to do. But to be honest, you actually tend to forget that you're actually in a real airplane at that stage. The simulators are so accurate. I mean, the simulators are set up in the exact same way as the airplane. It's the same equipment. Airbus supply the cockpits for the simulators. It's the same computer systems. If one of the computers fails in our simulator, we can actually replace it with one from the stores for an actual airplane. It's the same software. It has to be updated in the same way as the airplane software. Like airplane software gets updated about once every 4 weeks. The simulators have to be kept updated in the same way. So I mean, the simulator is basically treated as an airplane. It's signed off as an airplane. It has to be approved by the regulatory authorities like the CAA. So the CAA has to actually sign off your simulator if you're going to use it for training. So when you're actually in it, I mean, we joke that sometimes you're looking out the window and you say, yeah, the graphics are very good on this, aren't they? It's so similar to the simulator.
So you're totally immersed in the flying of the plane. You would not actually know you're in the plane or in a simulator.
No, it is totally immersive training. And again, when you're focused on what you're doing, you do tend to forget the fact that it is actually a simulator, that it's not a real plane. It's designed with the same parameters. It can perform to the same level. It has the same software. Obviously the instructor can type in failures, which then gets incorporated in. But then the warnings that come up are the exact same warnings that you would get on the plane. So like the training is totally immersive. The idea is that we can then just step into the actual airplane and fly it as if we'd been on it sort of permanently up until that. But no, we find that again, say the training we do, we structure it around what's topical and what's relevant. Another thing we have in aviation, which again healthcare doesn't really have yet, because of our reporting systems, we have an idea of what's going on, like situational awareness around the industry generally. For example, one of the biggest changes in the last decade was after the Air France 330 accident over the Atlantic. The AF 447 accident where the 330 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The black boxes weren't found for about 2 years after that, but our planes have a telemetry system similar to Grand Prix cars. So if I have an engine failure on the way across the Atlantic, there's a telemetry system via satellite that will send a message to our engineering department in Dublin and also to the Airbus factory in Toulouse and flag up that my specific airplane has had this specific failure. So there's a certain amount of information available on the ground in real time as to what is going on. So after the Air France accident, Airbus managed to reconstruct what they thought had probably happened in the accident. And we were training what we thought had gone wrong in the simulators. I was on the 330 at that stage. We were training in the simulators in Toulouse within like less than a month. About 3 or 4 weeks later, we worked out this is why we think the airplane crashed. This is why we think it went wrong. This is the mistakes we think the pilots made. And here's how we're going to rectify that and fly it differently. And within weeks, Airbus has sent out new information to all Airbus operators globally about how we were going to fly this particular type of event in future. And it has changed the whole stall recovery technique for Airbus since that. And ever since as well, twice a year in the simulator, we now do a thing called UPRT, upset prevention and recovery training. So we actually anticipate that type of accident happening now, and we have a standardized procedure for how to address that. So we've got a memorized system now that if we get into the same sort of position, we have a very simplistic sort of 4 or 5 step procedure to try and recover the plane before it becomes irrecoverable. So again, we take mistakes that happen, we publicize them very widely, we share all the information, and then we try and resolve it to try and stop that accident from happening again. And we're now, 12, 13 years down the line, and that accident hasn't happened again.
And the telemetry gave you the same information as what you later discovered from the black box?
Well, it doesn't give the same information. It's
but in this situation,
superficial overview.
Yeah.
What happens is our system, there's like a 3-step procedure. The telemetry system is running in the background for all of our airplanes all the time, so that the engineers in Dublin can access their major information, and they get a relatively superficial overview of what's happened. Once we land, the planes actually send information via the Wi-Fi system. It's a more detailed set of events of what happened, and it goes into our safety office with a group of staff that are based there. Every day, every flight gets downloaded into the safety system. It monitors all the various parameters. It actually monitors how I moved to controls, what switches I moved, how far forward I pushed the side stick, how far to the left, and so on, what thrust settings I used. It's all recorded automatically into our safety system. And then we have parameters built in over in the office that if I exceeded certain parameters, it'll flag up a red flag, and they'll go and look at my flight and look at it in a bit more detail. Or if we have like an incident where something went wrong, I can flag it up, and then we can pull out the information and actually recreate the events around the time that the incident happened, and can see actually how I was flying the plane. So basically I'm being monitored all the time. And then the black box is the 3rd level, then, that if there is an actual accident, that they can download information in a lot of detail and reconstruct exactly what happened. And obviously with the cockpit voice recorders, records usually about the last 30 minutes worth of speech in the cockpit. So we can recreate like what the pilots were talking about. It records the radio calls, it records any calls from the cabin crew and so on. So we have a lot of information that we can then dig into to try and work out what went wrong here.
This brings up an interesting area. How do you feel, even though you're a captain? I won't ask, but you might reply. What happens, or how do you feel when you are red flagged?
Well, obviously I haven't had any major incidents, thankfully, touch wood. But I mean, we have minor incidents all the time. Like Aer Lingus, we're quite a small airline. We only have about 55 airplanes. And yet our air safety office gets maybe 15, 20 reports per day. Now, most of it's very small stuff and very insignificant stuff. But going back to James Reason's Swiss cheese model, which I think we're all familiar with, very small events, if they all line up, turn into very big events. So we sort of start troubleshooting at a very, very low level, and look and say, well, here's something that went wrong. Now, I would report something that maybe something unusual that happened. I thought, yeah, it was no big deal. We managed it very well. But on a different day, this could have led to a bigger event, which could have led to a bigger event. So like this needs to be looked at. So any small events that we have, we can put our hand up. Now we have what's called a just culture. Now, just to clarify, a lot of people in healthcare call our system a no blame culture. Aviation does not have a no blame culture. If I make a mistake, I will be blamed. I will be held accountable. But the difference is with a just culture is if I've made a genuine mistake that is not gross negligence or not deliberate harm, that if I put my hand up and admit to it, there'll be no disciplinary action. I won't be dismissed. I won't be sacked. That means then that we can put our hands up without any fear of any issues, and we do. If I have a small event on board, I can report it actually in real time. We all have iPads now that the company supply. On our transatlantic flights, we have Wi-Fi on board, so I can actually report an incident and have it sent to their safety office live during the flight, so they can actually be looking at the issue before I've even landed. And like, we have no hesitation in sending information like that in. Now, with regards to red flag, if the parameters have been exceeded, But we have, again, to try and protect staff and maintain everybody's integrity, the information that the Air Safety Office gets is de-identified. So they can see that a certain flight has had a certain incident. And we have an agreement in place between the company and between the Pilots Association that we nominate a representative each, and it's called the link person, so that the Air Safety Office can say, right, something happened on this flight that we would like a bit more information on. They contact the two link people, and the pilot's link person can then say, so he can then access who was actually on that flight. And if it turns out it's my flight, he can ring me and say, right, well, this has been flagged here. We need a bit more information. Can you help us out? Now, it can be kept anonymous if you wish, unless it becomes some major event. But in most cases, we all waive our anonymity because there's no real benefit in it. We all accept we make mistakes all the time. We're all happy to cooperate with it because it maintains everybody's safety. So if we do get contacted by the link person, saying that, luckily I haven't been in that position yet, but anyone that has, there's usually no hesitation in waiving anonymity and just cooperating with the Air Safety Office and saying, right, well, let's work out what did happen. Obviously, we've all done thousands upon thousands of flights. Why was that one different? Like, why did you make that decision that day? If it was incompetence, it would have flagged up long before, sort of 20 years down the line. So the company works on the basis of what went wrong, not who went wrong. So what you did that day, again, we're all professionals. Whatever you did that day obviously made sense to you at the time. So we have a look and say, right, so look, what was your thought processes leading up to that? Like, why did that decision make sense to you? And when you look at it, often there was, it actually did make sense at the time, but the parameters were slightly different. Again, the holes in the Swiss cheese had lined up differently that day. That suddenly that decision, which makes sense 99% of the time, actually showed that there was a flaw that day, and there was a tripwire that nobody had anticipated. And we then look into the system. We take a systems approach instead of a person-centered approach. We then look, so what tripwire did you trip over that day? Let's try now and re-engineer our system that we remove the tripwire, and ideally, if possible, actually build in a safety net, like say a checklist item that would trap that to stop it from happening again. But it's done on a just culture, not a no blame culture, but we use the learning to actually improve our system, which is why the aviation's safety record has been absolutely spectacular over the last 40 years. Whereas in healthcare, all the stats I've read show there's been absolutely zero progress in adverse events in the last 50 years.
And that is a significant point. You're learning all the time. And I take it then with your telemetry and Wi-Fi downloading each time you fly, there are people in your safety offices and Aer Lingus who are there 24/7. So if you're on your iPad across the Atlantic and you had a problem, somebody could come back to you with a suggestion if you hadn't thought of it.
Yeah, and we use that again. It is
so they're available 24/7 then, aren't they?
There's always someone. Again, I think in surgery we were always taught that basically, especially at a consultant level, you're the boss. It's up to you to know everything and to resolve everything, and everything stops with you. Whereas in aviation, we see it as a team sport. I'm the captain, so the buck stops with me, but I've got an awful lot of support and resources around me. When I was doing my command checks, I assumed that it's all going to be about knowledge, that you had to know absolutely everything about the airplane, every legal requirement and so on. Now, there is a fairly broad depth of knowledge that we are expected to know, but they actually discourage us from knowing absolutely everything because you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get that wrong, and as well, information gets updated constantly. So they want us to have a fairly broad level of knowledge, but they want us to check the details usually. So they want us to know, well, where do we access that information? And as I say, on board now, every pilot has their own company iPad, and all the manuals, instead of them being carried in the plane now, all the manuals that we need are actually downloaded on the iPad, and we have search facilities built in that Apple has supplied, that we can then go searching for information in the manuals so we can find out. So the idea is that we want you to have a fair broad knowledge of what's happening. We then want you to go and check it and cross-reference it in the manuals. And beyond that, then say, I've got the manuals to refer to. I've got a co-pilot beside me who is possibly more knowledgeable than me. You can refer to them. You've got up to 8 cabin crew behind you that you can ask for information. You've actually got passengers. I had a passenger coming back from New York the other day. It was one of our company pilots. I was over visiting a family member. So if it had a problem, I had another pilot on board that I could ask for advice or ask for opinions. We have other staff on board. Beyond that, then we have a text message system where I can send the text message we can send it ahead to New York. We can send it back to our headquarters in Dublin. We can ask air traffic control for help. They can patch information on. And then on our transatlantic fleets, we have a satellite phone. So I can actually literally lift the phone mid-Atlantic and phone someone on their mobile and ask for help. So say we always have an executive captain. So it's one of the senior management captains available. So if I'm having a problem that I want a second opinion on, I can literally lift the phone mid-Atlantic and call him on his mobile or call her on her mobile and ask, say, here's the predicament I have. Here's what I think. What do you think? And we have ops controllers with a whole sort of team of people available to us. And even for example, I had an engine failure on a 330 on the way to Los Angeles back about, it's about 13, 14 years ago now. We sorted out the issue and started diverting towards Montreal. And then I lifted the sat phone to ring the base in Dublin to sort of let them know what was going on. And the first reaction when I called Dublin and said we've had an engine failure, we're diverting to Montreal, was yeah, we know. It's already flagged up on our system that you've had an engine failure. We can see on the satellite system that you're turning off from your route. We can see roughly the direction you're heading, and we've guessed that you're heading towards Montreal. So we've actually already been in touch with Montreal, and they're expecting you. So by the time we got there, they already had a team of people set up, waiting to meet the plane. And they had engineers notified that we're coming in with an engine problem. Here's the service we're likely to need. So the whole thing is like a team sport. And then say when we're on the ground, we're watching the clock because we have limitations as to how many hours we can fly. Again, something that surgery could maybe look at. I used to do 56-hour unbroken shifts in cardiothoracic surgery. Now, I don't think any of us can try and claim that that was safe. When we were on the ground, we were watching the clock, and when we could see we were starting to run out of hours, we were then liaising with a different part of the company to say, right, we're now going to need a couple of hundred hotel rooms in Montreal tonight because we're running out of hours to fly on to Los Angeles. So we have a whole team of people to fall back on all the time. So as the captain, as opposed to being sort of the lead violinist in the orchestra, you're really the conductor of the orchestra. You can't play a note at all, but you're very good at coordinating people around you to play the notes for you.
I love that analogy. So knowing what you know from the airline industry, how would you change the training of a surgeon?
I think we need to first, as I say, we need to get away from the focus on knowledge and sort of technical skills. So we expect a certain level of knowledge and a certain level of technical skills. I'll say tomorrow in the simulator, I'm doing my 6-monthly check. I'll be taken off. I'll have an engine blow up just as I'm about to leave the runway. They'll check that I've actually got the technical skills to fly the airplane with one engine, with the other engine on fire, try and put it out, come around and land in poor weather conditions and stuff. So there is a certain level of technical knowledge, which is assumed all the time. But in surgery, I think we sort of check that and then stop. In aviation, that's basically the starter for 10. Once you've got that nailed, then we go on to the human factor stuff, which isn't really taken into account in surgery. Tomorrow, when I do my engine failures, I can sort of carry it out absolutely perfectly. I can bring it around, I can land and do an absolutely exemplary performance. But one of the things that's been checked is our crew resource management, or CRM, sort of interaction with the other crew member. If it turns out I did a total solo run and completely froze out the co-pilot and did everything by myself, but got an absolutely 100% successful result, I fail my check and I'm not flying the next day. The CRM has to be passed independently. We have to be able to work with each other and cooperate with other staff members. If you can't do that, it doesn't matter how good the flying was, you failed your exam and you're not flying tomorrow.
Can you elaborate on that?
On that.
Elaborate on the CRM. This is obviously communication skills, and as you know, at the Edinburgh College we have the non-operative technical skills and surgery focusing on this, but you are tested regularly as part of your simulation. So what did they score? What do they look at when doing this?
There's new systems come in across Europe over the last 3 to 4 years now. Aer Lingus has been one of the pioneers that has been sort of driving the program. It's called the evidence-based training, an EBT program. So the CRM, basically CRM has been spoken about in healthcare for the last 10 years, and I think it's been rejected basically. About 10 years ago, someone decided that bringing in our aviation CRM into healthcare was the cure to all your problems basically. So they took aviation CRM, they dumped it on top of you. Basically, more or less, again, back to healthcare analogy, it was transplanted into healthcare, and it wasn't a very good tissue match, so healthcare rejected it. And anytime I mention CRM now in healthcare, you can just see the shutters come down in front of you. So that's what I talk about, error management. In CRM for us is only a small part of our overall safety management system. We see that as a small component of what we do. But from the CRM aspect, say in the simulator tomorrow, we've now widened it out into 9 sort of core sort of competencies, we call them. It's simple things like communication, as you say, because again, in healthcare and aviation, 70% of adverse events are related to communication issues. It's widened out into actual sort of technical knowledge. So again, the things we've already spoken about, technical knowledge, technical ability, actually being able to fly the airplane and so on. But then beyond that, then it widens out into workload management, teamwork, communication skills, being able to interact with other people and make best use of the resources around you. Like the whole idea of crew resource management when it came in initially was making the best possible use of all available resources. I find in healthcare that a lot of surgeons specifically don't really use the resources around them. They're very independent. They rely on themselves for everything, which means that they're missing out a huge sort of level of support and opportunities with people around them who possibly know more than they do, but have better situational awareness because they're not as focused on what they're doing. So say tomorrow, we'll be doing various scenarios, and the instructor will be sort of watching to see how we perform over the overall sort of skills workbook, basically, to see can we actually fly the plane. But then we'll see, well, how well did we manage the workload? How well did we manage the teamwork? Did I use everything that was available to me? Was there glaring errors that I missed that I could have used? Like, say I might have been so focused on landing the airplane, I think possibly there's another airport 30 miles away which has a much longer runway, which would have been much more appropriate. But you were so focused on what you're doing, you missed that. Maybe somebody else sitting beside you, like maybe the co-pilot, was sitting thinking, oh, why is he not going to the other airport? Whereas I would sort of put my mental model together, and I say to the co-pilot, right, here's how I see it. And I'd explain like my sort of model, like, what do you think? Or ideally, we're even trained that before we even do that, before I give my opinion, because obviously I'm the captain, so you're the consultant. If you give your opinion, chances are your junior staff are going to go, yeah, I agree with that. So we're sort of trained as well to say, right, before you assess the problem together, and then go, okay, what do you think? What do you suggest? And let them come up with their idea. And then you've got your own as well. So now you've got 2 or 3 ideas. So rather than leading the way, let them lead. So again, it's all part of the teamwork. And again, crew resource management, making best use of your resource. Human factors is about understanding psychology and how things work. If I dictate a plan, my co-pilot is 99% certain going to say, yeah, that's a good idea. Whereas if I ask him, well, what's your plan? Chances are he's maybe going to come up with a better idea than I thought of.
And I suppose that applies with consultant surgeons and trainees, because as you say, so. some of the staff training are going to be more up to date, more au fait of current evidence.
It's not even
and bringing fresh eyes to a problem.
It's more basic than that. It's not even about current evidence. They might just have a better overview. You're so focused. I said, no, the patient might have arrested. You're very focused on that. They might be one step removed, that they can see a bigger picture. When I was training, one of the suggestions I made at one stage was, they say we were cardiac surgeons. We had never met the cardiologists. The consultants dealt with cardiologists. As SHOs and registrars, we had absolutely no interaction with them. So I thought, like, no, I'm working here as a cardiac surgeon, but I've never met any of the cardiologists who've been looking after this patient. I haven't done any anesthetics. So I suggested at one stage, well, why don't we do even, like, say, 3 weeks as a cardiology SHO, do 3 weeks as an anesthetic SHO, just to broaden out the situational awareness and have a better overview of what's happening. It didn't go down very well, and I'm now flying airplanes. But similarly, the registrar that is working with you, he's one step removed. He might have a better overview of what's actually happening. So you might suggest, well, this is what we need to do. He might see a better route. No, it's not even about technical knowledge or experience or something. He might just have a better overview or a better situational awareness. Well, why don't we try this?
So how would you define the attributes of a surgeon and a pilot? How do they compare? Or don't they?
Oh, no, but they do obviously similarities. The surgeons and pilots, they're both extremely professional. They're both extremely driven. They're both extremely focused. There's a lot of the same sort of skills. Obviously, when you saw a chest open, we want to make sure that you're going to be able to manage to land this patient. Once I take off, no matter what the weather conditions are, I'm now committed. I have to land that airplane somewhere. So we need to sort of plan ahead. Like we always look ahead and say before we take off, we always make sure, well, if all this goes wrong, is there somewhere I can land this plane? If the weather's bad, say taking off out of Dublin, well, if I catch fire, is the weather good enough for me to get back into Dublin on one engine? If not, well, can I go to Shannon? Can I go somewhere else? So again, we in surgery and in healthcare or in aviation, we both try and look a bit further down the line and try and work out where is this going. So like that's the similarities. I think the differences, again, it's the sort of stuff we've already touched on. I think the big thing is human factors. I don't think healthcare takes human factors into account in any level of near where it should be. There's very, very few human factors professionals working in healthcare. I think in surgery, we should be focusing when we're selecting surgeons. I think we've tended to focus on the technical skills, technical knowledge, hand-eye coordination, and so on. But then we get, I've worked with some surgeons who you couldn't let near a patient when they're conscious. They couldn't communicate, they couldn't explain things. I think we need to work more on so selecting people that can work as a team, can interact with the nursing staff, can interact with the allied healthcare professionals, can interact with the patients and the families themselves. Like say in aviation, we see crew resource management has been a very wide sort of approach. We see the patient and their family as part of the crew. I think surgeon could maybe start focusing on that more. As when we're selecting surgeons, we can maybe look at skills like that more rather than just the technical skills.
That is very interesting, and I totally agree. As somebody commented the other day, the best surgeons actually are the best communicators.
Again, it's more to it than just who's got the best pair of hands.
Indeed. Before we close, can I ask you now, do you miss surgery?
Yeah, I love surgery. I love cardiothoracic surgery. I didn't leave voluntarily. I didn't want to leave. I left basically because I was left. I could see no other option. There was no career path left open for me. I had exhausted all the possibilities. I had done everything that had been asked of me. I had worked 120-hour weeks. I'd done the long shifts. I'd written research papers. I'd put an MD proposal together. I'd done everything in my power to sort of be in position to get a consultant training post, and it just wasn't available to me. I didn't leave voluntarily. I was left because I had no other option. And looking back, it was still the right decision, but it's one that I'm very sad that I had to make. And that's why for the first 6 or 7 years, I continued doing accident and emergency work on my days off, just for a bit of fun, basically, and to keep my hand in, until eventually I ran out of time. And for the last 10 or so years, that's why I focused on sort of a creative framework health to try and bring our aviation angle back into healthcare. Because to be honest, I mean, healthcare is still my first love. I would still love to be back doing this, and I would still love to contribute something back to healthcare. And I think I'm in a position where I can contribute something unique back. I've been spent the last decade trying to get over the line in healthcare, like, so far unsuccessfully, but I think I'm still knocking at the door. But no, I still miss it every day. I'd love to be doing cardiac surgery.
Now, that is an excellent place to end our discussion. I think you have brought up so many important points in this discussion, and I would very much like you to continue working with the Faculty of Surgical Trainers to bring your experiences, unique experiences, to the training of the next generation of surgeons. Thank you very much indeed for your time.